If we haven't had a chance to meet yet, I'm Kyle, the pastor here. Honored that you would take some time to be with us. If you are new with us, we're honored that you take some time to join us. We are about to start a series where we're going to be teaching through a section of the Bible that's called the Minor Prophets, or the Book of the 12. And this is the section of the Bible that proves that the Bible was not made up, because it's just super weird. And I love teaching about the weird stuff because I feel like there's so many things that we can mine from that. It is odd and offensive sometimes and all kinds of stuff that you just don't expect from a Bible. And so if you are new to the Bible, we don't want to assume that you can just dive in. So I just want to let you know up front, we're starting in season 4 of the Bible today. So I'm going to very quickly catch you up on seasons 1 through 3. Okay, so season 1 of the Bible, basically what happens is that God created a perfect world where he has created humanity as one of his creation. He kind of crowns them gives them dominion, gives them work. They name the animals, they're taking care of the animals, they're supposed to cultivate the earth and kind of like mine it for all the good resources and make stuff with it. And then humans get tricked by this sly serpent into believing that they can actually become like God, and then they'll just decide what's good and evil for themselves. And that's when this thing in the Bible called sin enters into the world. And when that happens, it messes up our relationships. It messes up like the way that we work. And God then begins kind of like a secret rescue mission through a family. There's this guy named Abraham. He says that through that family, all the nations of the earth are going to be blessed. But as you continue reading, that family then gets enslaved by this huge Egyptian empire. And then God famously delivers them. You can catch up on that in the Prince of Egypt later. And basically what happens is they get set free from that group, and God establishes among his people this covenant, this agreement that they're going to follow these things, that he's going to bless them so that they can be a blessing to all the nations of the earth, so that all the nations will actually worship him by the example of the way that his people live. Now, what happens as you continue reading is that things get kind of sticky. But before we get to that, one of the things that happens in this whole epic story is that Moses, you may have heard of him, Ten Commandments guy, doesn't look like Charlton Heston, but anyways, he asks God kind of like bluntly if he can see God's glory, if he can see God's face. God's like, you can't see my face, you'll die. But what we can do is I can fly by you, and I can put my hand over a rock. This is in the Bible. I'm not making this up. I'll put my hand over a rock. I'll fly by. When I do that, I will remove my hand, and you can see the back part of my robe. This is what happens. When that happens, God makes this proclamation as he whizzes by, and it's a description of God's character, and that's really important to season 4 of the Bible. So I just want to read that together. This is found in Exodus chapter 34. This is what God says as he passes by. The Lord is compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in faithful love and truth, maintaining faithful love to 1,000 generations, forgiving iniquity, rebellion, and sin. But he will not leave the guilty unpunished, bringing the consequences of the father's iniquity on the children and the grandchildren to the 3rd and the 4th generation. It's a pretty intense way to talk about yourself. And we are now entering into season 4 of the Bible. And another thing that you need to know that happened in season 3 is that there was this group of people that said, God said to his people, hey, you don't need a king. I will be your king. I am your God. You will be my people. I will be your king. Trust me, I'm a better king than you can get. And they said, no, we want a king. Thanks, God, but we'll take it from here. So God gives them a king, and they have 3 kings where the whole kingdom is united. But then after the 3rd one, everything gets kind of messy, and so they have 2 separate kingdoms. And this is important because in season 4, you're going to see that the kingdoms get talked to in different ways. So Israel is in the north, okay, oftentimes called Ephraim in the texts that we're going to read through over the next 12 weeks. And Judah is the kingdom in the south. Judah is a kingdom of promise. There's a Davidic line. Again, that was like season 2, middle of season 2, season 3. God makes this promise to David that David is going to have in his lineage a king that's going to be on the throne forever, okay? Important for you to remember that because later in this season, some stuff is going to happen that's going to draw a lot of questions about how that works. So, Israel, Judah, you guys got it? Northern kingdom, southern kingdom. We're going to look at the book of the 12 over the next 12 weeks. And the reason for this, the reason we're calling it the book of the 12, and you may have heard it called the minor prophets before, but there's good archaeological evidence to support that actually all of these books are supposed to be taken together as one. They're always on the same scroll together in all the ancient documents that we have. And the reason for that is that together, these books draw that tension that we saw in God's character, that he is an everlasting God who loves and forgives iniquity, and he also punishes people to the 3rd and 4th generation. And how does that all work? And is he actually good? And how does he use geopolitical powers to accomplish what he wants to happen in the world? And how does that all look? And so we're going to look at all those things. So the book of the 12 is Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, a bunch of books you never heard of, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, not Malachi. Okay, today we're going to look at Hosea. And Hosea is basically a breakup song. Listen, there is something about breakup songs that just really gets us. You know what I'm saying? Like it's weird to see, but it's not uncommon for you to be driving down the road and to see a 50-year-old singing the new Olivia Rodrigo song at the top of their lungs because they feel it in their bones. There's a reason that Adele can sell out show after show after show in Vegas, and 50 and 60 and 70-year-olds that have been married for 35 years go and sing breakup songs. Because there's something about a breakup song that captures a human feeling that we have all experienced, which is betrayal. We have all been there. We have all experienced betrayal and sadness, and we need poets and artists. Now, arguably, there's other ways that you can express these art forms, but just bear with me here. The breakup song is the most easiest way that we can kind of get into this. You need poetry and you need songwriting to express this deeper ache that you feel. It helps you kind of get through it, right? How does God write a breakup song? Not so much with teenage angst, okay? But he does do things in this way. I believe that the Song of Hosea, if I can say it that way, spends most of its time defining reality for people. In a relationship with one person that's perfect, the other person's always at fault. So this is kind of a complicated thing, but God is, through Hosea, is writing a breakup song to his people to help define reality. Within the definition of reality, there is a passionate plea with his people. And there's also a prophetic promise. So that's where we're going today. We're now dipping our toe into season 4 of the Bible. You guys ready? Here we go. Okay. So if you have a Bible and you want to follow along, we're going to be jumping around a lot because there's 14 chapters in Hosea, okay? So lots of grace here. 14 chapters. We're going to try to explain sort of what's going on, but I want to spend the bulk of our time. So here we go. Here's first part of Hosea. This is what happens. God calls Hosea a prophet, and this is how you know the Bible's not made up. Go marry a woman of promiscuity. Go marry a woman of ill report. We don't know for sure if Gomer, that's Hosea's wife, if she was a prostitute. Some of the language is a little confusing. We know for sure that she was a woman of promiscuous behavior. She was not a one-man kind of woman. He marries her, and he instructs Hosea to have children of promiscuity. For the land is committing blatant acts of promiscuity by abandoning the Lord. It's pretty shocking, right? That this is how God is now going to make a breakup song through redemptive theater, okay? He's going to put somebody out there to show Israel what they are doing to him. And now he's going to use poetry to explain how this all works. So then you got Hosea. Hosea has 3 kids. First son, Jezreel. It means the Lord scatters. That's what it means. It's also very poetic because the king who is in power in Israel, remember that's the northern kingdom, at this moment, he killed somebody to take power in a city called Jezreel. And later, God says he is going to take everybody to this valley, also called Jezreel, where he is going to let the Assyrian army come in and take them all away and scatter them. This is the definition of poetic justice. All right? The second kid is named Lo Ruhama, which means no compassion, no mercy. And the third kid, Lo Ami, not my people. Very odd, right? Oh, Hosea, I haven't seen you in a while. How you doing? Are these your kids? Yeah, that's the Lord scatters, no compassion, not my people. Very awkward, right? This is so weird. And it's like, oh, how's your wife doing? Not so good. Not so good. She's out doing her thing, and yeah. Hosea is a living prophetic word that also has words for God's people. We got to continue to define the reality here. So Hosea continues on in chapter 2. God actually takes the children of Hosea, and he says those children should rebuke their mother. And the way that he's doing about this is it's almost like Israel has been this like promiscuous wife, and the offspring, the people that are currently Israel in the kingdom, are the children of promiscuity. And he is saying, to be truly Israelites, you need to reject your mom. Rebuke your mother. Rebuke her. She is not my wife, and I am not her husband. Let her remove the promiscuous look from her face and her adultery from between her breasts. Otherwise, I'll strip her naked and expose her as she was on the day of her birth. I'll make her like a desert, and like a parched land, I will let her die of thirst. I will have no compassion on her children, because they are children of promiscuity. Yes, their mother is promiscuous. She conceived them and acted shamefully. For she thought, I will follow my lovers, the men who give me my food and water, my wool, my flax, my oil to drink. Therefore, this is what I will do. I will block her with thorns. I will enclose her with a wall so that she cannot find her paths. She will pursue her lovers, but she won't catch them. She will look for them, and she will not find them. She will think, I'll go back to my former husband, for then it was better than it is for me now. She does not recognize that it is I who gave her the grain and the new wine and the fresh oil, that lavished silver and gold on her, which they used for Baal. I will now expose her shame in the sight of her lovers, so that no one will rescue her from my power. I will put an end to all her celebrations, her feasts, the new moons, the Sabbaths, and her festivals. I will devastate her vines and her fig trees. She thinks that these are her wages that her lovers have given her. I will turn those into a thicket, and the wild animals will eat them. And I will punish her for the days of the Baals, which she burned incense, and she put on her rings and her jewelry, and she followed her lovers, but she forgot me. What is Baal worship? What does this mean? Baal was the god of fertility for the Canaanites. Now, I know this is hard for you, but I just want you to imagine that you are living in an agrarian society, and your whole sustenance is dependent on whether or not it rains. I know you guys don't think about rains much, because now we have weather balloons and all kinds of people working on this, and we just go to the supermarket and buy our food, right? But if there was a drought in Iowa, we would know about it. It would be bad for the world in a lot of ways. And so what happened was ancient peoples, almost always created some kind of god that they would worship to kind of help it rain, to get the goods. Essentially, it was a god that worked, you know? And the biblical vision for this is that behind these idols, these gods, was actually this demonic force at work, which would sometimes work, but like just enough to kind of keep you on edge, and then begin to invite you to sacrifice more and more and more, which always led to sacrificing humans, specifically your kids. And the way that you would gather to worship Baal was you would come together in celebration of fertility, which there was cultic prostitution. So you just imagine everybody gets together, they all make love, sort of, and then they give these offerings to each other. This was the way that we would come together and worship Baal. And then on top of this, Israel wasn't just worshiping Baal, but they were nervous because the people around them were kind of getting big, And they kind of looked scary and a little bit evil. So what they did is that they made an alliance with the Assyrians, the big, scarier, eviler people. That's a word, eviler. So there were worship issues and there were strange alliances, which God says is tantamount to spiritual adultery. They are cheating on him. This is God's version of I carved my name into his leather seats. What's the song I'm thinking of? Thank you, that one. Yeah. Of his pretty little souped-up four-wheel drive. Yes, this is what happens when people cheat, okay? This is what God is saying through this. This is his people have cheated on him. He is betrayed, and he is trying to define what is true. And this is what's going on. And this is what I need you to understand, and I promise we will unpack this further over the next 12 weeks. But consistently in the book of the 12, idolatry always equals injustice. Idolatry should be defined like this. It is when we ascribe ultimate worth and worship to anything else that is not the God who created us. And any time we ascribe ultimate worth and worship to anything else that is not God, we inevitably use other people to worship that God. Always. Now listen, we don't have a lot of like Baal statues set up in our world anymore. Now we have football stadiums. Now we have skyscrapers where people go. Now we have the halls of justice, right, which we're having these big worship battles over. These are the places where we now have ascribed ultimate worth to something, and because we ascribe ultimate worth to those things, we are living in a world that is full of injustice. And there is no secular solution to justice problems in our world that does not address the worship issue. If we continue to live in a society that worships money, you can be certain that people will always act unjustly to each other. And there is not enough protections or laws that we can make to protect people from doing that. They will. And this is what happens to God's people. When they begin to worship other things, immediately they will commit injustice toward each other. And Jesus comes along. This is like season 7 of the Bible. Jesus comes along and he says that the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your soul and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Because in Jesus' concept of loving God, there is always a justice element attached to the salvation and the love of God. Always, always, always. Those who love God act justly. They live in righteousness with God and in right relationship with others. Listen, we don't have Baal anymore, but we have money, sex, power. These are things that people ascribe ultimate worth to, and they give their lip service to God, and they say they love God, and they say they want to worship God, but they aren't. This is how Timothy Keller describes it, what many people call psychological problems. Simple issues of idolatry, perfectionism, workaholism, chronic indecisiveness, the need to control the lives of others. All of these stem from making good things into idols that then drive us into the ground as we try to appease them. Idols dominate our lives. The idol that sometimes works for you, that helps you to get that good, it will always ask increasingly more and more and more from you until it crushes you. Always. The last section of God defining the reality. In this section of Hosea, God comes after the leaders his priests. And he says that he will punish them the most because he says that the people are destroyed for a lack of knowledge, because you have rejected knowledge. I reject you from serving as my priest. Since you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your sons. Listen, this is not mental assent knowledge. This is not, I read the biggest book on theology and now I have it. Wrong. That is not what's in the language here. This is an intimate knowing and acknowledgement of God in the everyday life stuff. That is what this is about. It is an intimate knowledge of the living God. And what has happened in Israel, and I would argue what continues to happen, is that the leaders of God's people do not have an intimate knowledge of the God that they are speaking about. They have only the words and the theology, but they have no relationship with this God. And they continue to lead a people that is without knowledge, without a real understanding of who God is. This is the reality that God defines for his people then and for his people now. And then he continues with a passionate plea. You would think if this is the reality that God's defining, he would have no interest in reaching out and trying to mend anything, because he doesn't have anything to mend on his side. He is the betrayed. But instead, he says this: come, let us return to the Lord. For he has torn us and he will heal us. He has wounded us and he will bind up our wounds. He will revive us after 2 days. And on the third day, he will raise us up so that we can live in his presence. Let's strive to know the Lord, to know him. His appearance is as sure as the dawn. He will come to us like the rain, like the spring showers that water the land. Do you see? God's people are so intent on worshiping the God of the rain, and he is saying, if you just turn to me, I will come to you as surely as the rain. And then later in this same section, we have a verse that gets repeated by Jesus when he comes. I desire faithful love and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Listen, here, this word faithful love, it gets translated a bunch of different ways in all your Bibles, so I just want to talk about this real quick. This word in ancient Hebrew is the word chesed. And chesed is a faithful, loyal love that is a commitment between people. And God is saying he wants faithful, loyal love from his people, not sacrifice. God's not impressed with all the things that you don't do for him. He wants faithful love from you. Listen, because faithful love always sacrifices. Do you see? This isn't about the negative side of things, all the things you're going to give up for God. This is about when you are faithfully loving him, you will naturally give up those things. Faithful love, Hesed love, is like an 80-year-old husband and wife that have been married for 60 years. The wife gets dementia. The husband stops everything that he's doing to care for his wife. It is a practical, hands-on kind of love. It is not just a mental love. It is not feel-good feelings about God. It is a hands-on love for him. And he wants knowledge in his people. He wants us to know him. And listen, God is not some kind of teenage angst where he's just like begging for us to come back. It is because it's actually for our good and our flourishing as humans to know him and to faithfully love him. And when we don't, it always leads to awful things. But let me just tell you, this breakup song has a redemptive bridge. There's a prophetic promise that exists. Back to Hosea 2. It says, in that day, there's some day coming, this is the Lord's declaration, you will call me my husband. You will no longer call me my Baal. Remember, God's people were worshiping Baal? The word Baal here, there's like a play on words in the original text, because what this is saying is that you will no longer call me my master. That's what Baal said. It wasn't, God wanted a closer relationship with his people than for his people to just say, my master and my Lord. He wanted them to call him their husband. I will remove the names of the Baals from their mouth. They will no longer be remembered by their names. On that day, I will make a covenant for them with the wild animals, the birds of the sky, the creatures that crawl on the ground. God is saying that the sin that the people commit, it has even affected the birds and the animals. But one day he's going to fix all that he will shatter the bow, the swords, the weapons of war in the land, and he will enable the people to rest securely. I will take you to be my wife forever. I will take you to be my wife in righteousness, justice, love, and compassion. I will take you to be my wife in faithfulness. You will know the Lord, and on that day I will respond. This is the Lord's declaration. I will respond to the sky, and it will respond to the earth. The earth will respond to the grain, new wine, fresh oil, and they will respond to Jezreel. Remember, that means God scatters? Look what happens now. I will sow her, the scattered one, in the land for myself. And I will have compassion on no compassion. And I will say to not my people, you are my people. And he will say, you are my God. That's the best that I can do to try to give you the full picture of what Hosea is about in this amount of time. So what do you do with this? What does it have to do with Monday, for real? You know? Because Monday's coming. Let me ask you this. What is the reality of your knowledge of God right now? Because can I just say this in love? God works in reality, not in whatever fantasy world that we have made, where we imagine ourselves to have some kind of knowledge of God that we don't have. Listen, guys, I can tell when some of you come to me and you do the God talk with the pastor. I can tell when there's no depth there. All right? And I'm not trying to say this to shame you, but I'm just saying this, do not be self-deceived into thinking that you have a knowledge of God that you don't have. God is not impressed with your sacrifice. He's not impressed with your church attendance. He wants you to know him. Do you know him? The second thing is this. How can you turn today? And this is great. I was talking to somebody after the first service, and they were saying that sometimes when we talk about turning back to God, we imagine that what God's asking us to do is to turn around toward him and begin to walk that distance that we have walked all the way away from him. But the truth is that it's a lot more like when a kid runs away from home and the parent is just about 300 yards behind them, just kind of keeping close eye. And then as soon as the kid turns around, there they are, just waiting for them to come home. This is the picture that we have of God. He always, and we'll see this over the next 12 weeks, we'll see that whenever we turn, God is ready to turn towards us. And then, how can you trust Jesus to make it right? Listen, whatever it is that you are going through, I just want to encourage you that Jesus is actually enough for whatever it is. Now, I recognize that is a hard pill to swallow sometimes. But I want to ask you, are you really trusting in God for your sustenance of life? Or is it kind of like your 401k, and God? Is it kind of like you're trying to kind of play your options? Are you maintaining your prophetic witness as a Jesus follower, or are you making questionable alliances with evil people that hate the same people that you hate? Because that is spiritual adultery. So listen, as we end our time today, I want us to ask the Spirit in earnest, because we believe that the Spirit of God is still at work in His people. And so if you feel comfortable with this, we're just going to take some time to respond together. And we'll just close our eyes. If you feel comfortable with it, we'll just posture our hands in surrender before God. And I just want you to ask the Holy Spirit these questions. Holy Spirit, what are my idols? The book of Hosea closes with these stanzas as the last moment of the song. Let whoever is wise understand these things. Whoever is insightful recognize them, for the ways of the Lord are right, and the righteous walk in them, and the rebellious stumble in them. Listen, as we transition our time into a time of remembering Jesus and what He's done for us, I just want you to take a moment to remember that the vision of Jesus for His followers is that they would be in Him, just as He is in the Father. Think about the level of knowledge that to be in Jesus. The Apostle Paul says it like this in Philippians, that this mind and this attitude that was in Christ should also be in us. That even though Jesus was God, He didn't consider His God status as something to be exploited. But instead, He came and He took the nature of a servant. Being found in human likeness, He was obedient even to death, even death on a cross. So that one day, at the name of Jesus, every knee in heaven and on earth and under the earth would confess that He is the Lord and King of all creation.